There's been a lot of talk lately in the last week or so about what agency, what representation will represent Ja Morant next. I'm here to provide some clarity on that conversation. Plus, I watched the national championship game last night. I saw Zach Edey, I saw Donovan Clingan, and I saw potentially what each player could add to the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's talk about all that coming up right here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, award-winning beat writer at the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me each and every day. Make sure you continue to tune in with us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you watch, wherever you listen. Locked On Grizzlies is there on pretty much every single platform. So continue to tune in with us on here. Today is just me on the show today. Joe Mullinax, my co-host, getting a well-deserved day off. Now you're stuck with me on today's show. But remember, today's show is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba in all caps. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome to this show on Locked On Grizzlies. And we got a lot to talk about here. The Grizzlies getting ready for a back-to-back, getting ready for as we said, this is the last week of the NBA season. But off the court, there's been some big news as of late as well. Some of you remember about a week ago came out that Ja Morant was switching, or parting ways, as it was previously reported from Adrian Wojnarowski at ESPN with his agency, at Tandem Sports. He's been with them since he was drafted at Jim Tanner. And now it kind of created this conversation on what's next for Ja Morant. And I've been kind of in the background, as a reporter. I've been kind of, talking to people around the league, talking to people associated, with the conversation, I guess is a good way of putting it, on what's next for Ja Morant. And I have a little bit more clarity. And spoiler alert, I'm not going to tell you exactly who I'm hearing where Ja Morant is potentially headed, but I can steer you in the right direction based on what I've heard for a couple reasons. I don't want to say exactly yet which representation that is. I spoke to people around that certain representation, and one of the people said that that's something I'm not willing to talk about yet, is what they told me. So they're not willing to talk about it yet. So I'm not going to put that out there just yet at this moment. But with all that being said, let's get into this whole agency talk. Like, why is this a big deal to some people? Let's break down something real quick. I've seen some people throw out, the big agents out there, the super agents, as so to speak. Rich Paul is the number one guy who comes to mind, over at Clutch Sports. He's a mega agent. He represents LeBron James and so many more players. But, I think in my opinion, it's a good thing, for an agent, when you have an agent like Rich Paul, is the power and the ability to, encourage, whatever the best interest is of that player. In a simple way, some people will see, Rich Paul and say things like, oh, no, that player could request a trade one day or things like that. And, the player movement conversation and things like that. But it's an agent's job to get the best opportunity for their players and whatnot. But here's the thing. Let's get into some of these agents real quick. Let's go down the list. The super agents of the NBA, so to speak. When you think of those guys, again, Rich Paul is the name that comes to mind. Clutch Sports Group. Some of the players he represents: LeBron James, Anthony Davis, De'Aaron Fox, Zach LaVine, Draymond Green, Ben Simmons. That's some of the names. Bill Duffy at WME Sports, DeAndre Ayton, Luka Doncic, Ant Simons, Julius Randle. Then Jeff Swartz of Excel Sports Management is another big one. He represents the Joker, Nikola Jokic, Tyler Hero, Brandon Ingram, Russell Westbrook, Kristaps Porzingis, Mark Bertelstein at Priority Sports. Another real big one, Bradley Beal, Michael Porter Jr. He also represents, a couple Grizzlies guys, Brandon Clark, Santi Aldama as well. Austin Brown at CAA, he represents a Grizzlies player as well. Jaren Jackson Jr., but he also represents Zion Williamson, Jordan Poole, Donovan Mitchell, guys of that nature. So with all those names being said, let's throw out a couple things that I've kind of heard and I know about the situation with Ja Morant. And one of those things is I fully expect Ja Morant to be the biggest person at his, the biggest NBA client at his agency. So if you just heard some of those names that I said are associated with some of those agents, with the Jeff Swartz of the world, with the Bill Duffy's, Rich Paul, Mark Bertelstein's, Austin Brown's. Do with that information what you will. But I expect Ja Morant, when he makes the announcement or whatever the case may be, once it's formally, formalized, he should be the biggest client in that pool. And then there's also the factor of you got to know who kind of like Ja Morant is in terms of what he represents. Not exactly what he is, because you got to be around him a lot to know, who he is and things like that, but kind of what he represents. I mean, pay attention to, what Ja Morant has said over the last 4 or 5 years in his interviews, the things that he stands for in terms of, the family part of things, the relatability and all that, those good things. All of those, I think, are, when you talk about what Ja Morant does next, those are important factors. When you talk about the agency, I know there's the business side of it as well, which, of course, for any player, you talk about agents and clients and things like that. That is very important. But I want to, that trust, having that familiarity, I think when you talk about player-agent relationships, that is very important. And I think that is a factor here when you talk about the case of Ja Morant. So I want to throw, those details out there pretty much. As of what's the holdup now, I really don't know. I expect it probably to be finalized sometime soon here. We'll see, what comes of it. And of course, I'll keep talking to people. And once I get even more clarity or more concrete knowledge on the situation, then I may unveil it on here and unveil it through my work at the Commercial Appeal or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, I think there's a very strong chance that Ja Morant's decision has pretty much already been made. They're just, I guess, whatever the case may be, to finalize the things. That's pretty much the last step at this point. But I wanted to throw that out there since there's been this whole talk about, what does this mean, for Ja? Or, is it a sign of things to going forward? I think with every player in the NBA, I mean, we see it pretty much all the time with some of the biggest players in the league. You go through these situations, and in Ja's case, I mean, it's no secret, what he's went through with the last year plus, with the suspensions, with the lost sponsorships and things. We remember, I think I was the one who put the story out there when the Powerade March Madness commercials were supposed to happen. It was a really big deal at the time. This was March Madness last year, and we never saw the commercial, on TV. It just ended up being a kid, working in the backyard on the tire. And that was supposed to be Ja. That was Ja Morant's commercial. It was a Powerade commercial and whatnot. But we never saw it come to fruition. And I think that, sponsorship, ran its course. And there were a couple more as well. So at the end of the day, it's all about branding. And it's all about, getting the most out of those situations. But I think for some players, it's also about that, having that comfort zone or whatever the case may be. So I haven't talked to Ja personally, and I don't know exactly what he is thinking. But based on the conversations that I've had with people, that's kind of been what I've been led to believe with this situation. So we'll keep you updated as more details kind of unfold there, of course. And when it's announced formally, we'll have more updates here on Locked On Grizzlies as well, and through my work at the Commercial Appeal. So make sure that you stay tuned with that as well. Coming up on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to switch tunes a bit. We're going to talk about some basketball. I watched the national championship game, which had two centers that a lot of Grizzlies fans and people associated with the team have been talking about. So we need to get into that conversation, what those two centers look like, and quite frankly, do we see them as a fit with the Memphis Grizzlies? I'm going to talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Here's the thing about LinkedIn. See, look, when you're hiring your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team fast and for free. You can't beat that. Fast and for free, because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive for you. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. Think about it like this. It's so easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. 24 hours. That's how easy it is at LinkedIn. So you want to go take advantage of this opportunity. Then all you got to do is post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba in all caps. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba in all caps. Terms and conditions may apply. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about Donovan, Clingan, and Zach Edey. They squared off in the national championship game. 2 potential centers for the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's talk about that here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies today. And we got to talk about the national championship game on the men's side. We saw Donovan Clingan up close. We saw Zach Edey. We also saw Stephon Castle, who was another guy, if you've been following what me and Joe Mullinax have been talking about on the show. Overall, I haven't been a huge fan of the idea of adding a center through the draft. I've been more so best player available. And there is, a process where I think a guy like Stephon Castle, super talented, freshman, potential one and done, could be the best player available for the Memphis Grizzlies. Well, we'll talk about that another day, the whole Stephon Castle conversation. We got to talk about these two centers. You watched them. If you watched the national championship game, I watched them. And we're just going to usher off a couple thoughts, And the first thing that stood out to me is, Donovan Clingan held his own from the perspective of Zach Edey was National Player of the Year 2 years in a row, which is historic. He is, he is the guy for Purdue. If you watch Purdue all this season, or if you just watched him in the national championship, if you just watched him in the national championship, you probably would think, how's this team? Well, you probably were, or you weren't. But if you're anything like me, but I've been watching him. But in the back of my mind, I kind of go, man, when he is off the court, they're all right. But this ain't a national championship team. But at the same time, what made Purdue so good to me is they knew how good Zach Edey was, and there were no egos. That's our best player, without a doubt. Get him the ball. He has to touch the ball every single possession. And that's clear through the way they play. But the only way that I saw UConn potentially losing this game was Zach Edey getting the ball. Of course, he draws a lot of fouls. If you've been paying attention, he draws a whole bunch of fouls. So Donovan Clingan, who's been prone to foul trouble at times, as we talked about a little bit in the past, he gets early, quick foul trouble. Zach Edey dominates the game. Purdue wins. That was one case scenario if Purdue won the game. Obviously, UConn is tough to beat, as we just saw. That's a juggernaut. Back-to-back, national championships. Congratulations to the Huskies on that. Double-digit wins in all games and utter dominance. They just look dominant. And that is a team that can beat you anyway. They can win ugly. They can win a shootout. They can shoot the 3-ball. They can dominate the paint. They have explosive scores like Stephon Castle with, NBA talent. However you want to play it. You want to play NBA style? You want to play rough and rugged? You want to get up and down? They can do all of that. But Donovan Clingan held his own against Zach Edey to the point. Yeah, you look at the numbers and you go, oh, yeah, man, Zach Edey scored 35 or whatever the case may be. Donovan Clingan, there were so many cases where Zach Edey had the ball pretty much, right in front of the rim. And that's 7'7" wingspan from Clingan, because he's 7'2" himself. He would put his arms straight up and would contest shots, and Edey would miss shots that he pretty much made all season long. Like, I gotta give credit where it's due. From that perspective, Donovan Clingan held his own, and again, you look at the raw numbers, and you say, oh man, Zach Edey still dominated him, and whatever the case may be. 37 points, 10 boards, 15 of 25 shooting from the field. But all in all, I thought that Donovan Clingan was really solid. He only finished with 11 points and 5 boards, but the 5 boards more because you're focused on Zach Edey. He's boxing him out. Let other guys go get the rebounds. You had guys like Cam Spencer crashing the glass, Stephon Castle, Alex Caravan, Tristan Newton. All those guys finished with 5 or more boards because it was clear. Clingan, you deal with him. We're going to come in, crash the glass, help you out on that end, and that's what UConn did. Moving on to the Zach Edey part of this conversation. I think when you talk about him, you talk about his fit in the NBA at this point. I mean, we know what the college player is. We know what the college player has done. He played with the Canadian national team, which I was very curious to see last summer in FIBA. Didn't get a lot of playing time in the FIBA World Cup with the Canadian national team with all the pros and stuff out there. But, I mean, him being on that team, said something to me. But Zach Edey, super talented player. We saw even in this game, there were a lot of times, as I said, with Donovan Clingan kind of quote-unquote holding his own. Holding your own is still Zach Edey getting 37 points on 15 of 25 shooting from the field and 7 to 10 from the free throw line. So there's only so much you can do, but terrific in the post. He did struggle, again, in this game in the pick and roll a little bit defensively. And that's where you talk about the NBA and how he translates. Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, all those guys got downhill, put Zach Edey in a position where he had to be a decision maker. Early in the game, he got a couple blocks off of it and looked really good. But as the game went on, UConn just kept going at him. Those blocks early in the game didn't deter them and say, hey, let's just settle for the mid-range jumpers. No, they kept getting downhill. And, there was some not great tape put out there about Edey in the second half, especially on the defensive end. But all in all, offensively, super talented dude. I think there's definitely a spot for him in the NBA. I'm not one of those Edey haters that are like, oh, I can't wait till he gets to the NBA so they can cook him and all that. No, I think the guy has legit talent at 7'4", very comfortable with a lot of bodies around him. Like, I mean, he's seeing multiple bodies so much, and he's very comfortable and very poised in those situations, and that really stood out to me in this game. We're going to talk about how these guys fit the Grizzlies in a second. But are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? And have you turned down the volume because of all that shouting? Well, guess what? You need to make the switch over to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that hooping and hollering, as my grandma would like to say. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. And it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. How do these guys fit with the Grizzlies? It's simple to me. Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey. Clingan, I think, right now is the better fit. He's 7'2". Again, he showed me something in this game. Like, the college game is much different than the NBA game. You got to be able to play in space a little bit as a big. I think Donovan Clingan is more adept at this point based on the film that's been put out of the two players. He is more adept at playing in space, not a quote-unquote finished product by any means in that area. At 7'2", 7'7" wingspan, we saw he held his own against Zach Edey. And I saw a stat. I think it was a Synergy Sports stat, and I'm blanking on who put it out there on social media. But there was a stat that said that Donovan Clingan only allowed 5 post-up scores, like post-up baskets, one-on-one, all season long. And I think Zach Edey had like 4 on him at some point in the game. It probably reached 5, actually. But the point is, Donovan Clingan is very hard to score on in the post. And that's pretty much when you talk about what the Grizzlies need. They don't need someone who's going to score 18 points a game, because that's not Donovan Clingan. They need someone who's going to get boards, who's going to protect the rim, who's going to set solid screens. And all of those areas are predicted as plus for Donovan Clingan in his NBA career, as well as being better adept at playing in space than Zach Edey. Right now, I think the national championship game kind of blurred some things on can Zach Edey, respond on the defensive end in the NBA. Offensively, I don't have a lot of questions. I think if he gets the ball in the paint and puts 2 feet in the paint, close your eyes, 2 points. Unless you're, a couple bigs in the NBA who are going to be taller than him probably for the first time in his career. But other than that, I think we talk about where you would like to get these guys right now. Grizzlies still projected to go in that 7 to 8 range potentially. Donovan Clingan, if he's there, that's your guy at this point. Zach Edey, he's all over the place in the mocks. You'll see a mock that has him in the late lottery. You'll see mocks that have him second round, whatever the case may be. We'll see how everything progresses with him. I think you don't close the door on the idea of him potentially being on the Grizzlies as well. Just when you talk about the two guys, I can see Donovan Clingan being a starter more so than I can see Edey being a future NBA starter because of the defensive versatility more than anything. The NBA, there's much more space in the college floor. It's a little bit more compact. So you got to be able to play in space because what you see a lot of times is those guards in college. That's why when they go from college, they're averaging 15 points a game. Then they go to the league and average more because there's more space. And for the explosive guards, I think of guys like Tyrese Maxey, who in college was pretty good, but when he got to the league, it was more space, and we saw that quickness, really shine. I think of players like that, and that could be the case for a guy like Stephon Castle too. So right now, I'm Donovan Clingan, better NBA prospect overall. Zach Edey had the better game, whatever the case may be, but Clingan was very impactful, leading UConn to that victory. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies for our last segment, we're going to break down this game coming up between the Grizzlies and the Spurs. But before we get to that, this episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Look, man, Game Time, here's the thing about it. You're tired of having these frustrated ticket buying experiences and things like that. You need to go over to Game Time. That's the place you need to be. Because personally, the NBA season, at least for me, Grizzlies season is almost over. So now it's time for me to go over to Game Time and take advantage of these opportunities, especially with baseball, because Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down closer as it gets to the first pitch. Remember that. I just gave you some free game. So with some killer last minute deals, all in prices, and you can get the views from your seat and the lowest price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. When you get these last minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports. It can be for concerts, comedy, theater, whatever. You can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose your seat in terms of zone deals. Again, in terms of seat views, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and you get the lowest price guaranteed. And if it's not the lowest price guarantee, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is coverage with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry out there, period. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you got to do right now, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's capital L and a capital O and on, and then capital NBA. So Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create account and redeem the code Locked On. That's capital L O C K E D, capital O N, capital NBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to recap this game. We're going to preview the game between the Grizzlies and the Spurs. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I'm Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thanking you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. If you've been listening so far on today's show, we talked about the Ja Morant agency situation. I know a lot of people have been wondering, what is he going to do next? What's coming? Try to provide a little bit clarity on that situation, as well as we talked about the Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey conversation as future centers for the Grizzlies. After the national championship game, UConn Huskies, 6 national titles now. I think that definitely makes you a blue blood. I know they've been to the Final Four 7 times and 6-0 in national championship game. That's some real good luck. Like I think Kansas, Duke, and North Carolina all have 6 national championship losses. So to have 6 championships is pretty dope with no losses. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about the NBA, and we're here to talk about the Grizzlies and the Spurs matchup. Well, of course, at this point of the season, every time we talk about a Grizzlies game, we got to start with the inevitable Grizzlies injury report because you just never know at this point. And you probably do know because, most of the main guys are out. But I'm going to go through the list real quick here because the Grizzlies are going to be missing a lot of guys in this game. Zaire Williams, Vince Williams. Well, this is the list of players who are out, by the way. Zaire Williams, Vince Williams, Yuta Watanabe, Marcus Smart, Derrick Rose, Ja Morant, John Conchar, Luke Kennard, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bain, Santi Aldama are all listed as out. Players listed as doubtful, which, by the way, probably not going to play. Very likely that they won't play. Jake LaRavia, Lamar Stevens. So you go to that list. I think that's 13 players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, that's 13 players. The Grizzlies will likely be without 13 guys. Now, how do you play an NBA game without 13 players when you usually have 15-man rosters and 3 two-way guys, which equals 18, which would mean they have 5 players left? Well, they have 5 players left, but they also have 3 players on 10-day deals at this point in time. Xavier Simpson, Malzeno Pereira, and the other one is Timmy Allen, who was the most recent 10-day signing. So those are going to be your Memphis Grizzlies in this game against the Spurs. And these guys got a lot on their plate. Gigi Jackson is probably going to be main guy you want to watch. Scottie Pippen Jr. is another big one that's going to be available in this game. Jordan Goodwin has been good as of late, as we talked about recently. Trey Jemison, it's another player that's probably going to be available. These guys got a pretty heavy task on their plate. The Grizzlies have won 13 consecutive games against the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs actually still have the longest streak between the two in franchise history in terms of head-to-head matchups. I think Spurs won like 21-22 straight against the Grizzlies when they were in Vancouver and early on in the Memphis Grizzlies days back in 01, 02, 03, back in that time. But so still some catching up to do to get there, but you can't get there without winning this one. So it's going to be up to those guys pretty much to beat the Spurs in that game. The Spurs have shut down a couple notable players for the season since the last time Memphis played them. Those names, shut down for the season, Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson, 2 of the Spurs' best scorers. A guy like Victor Wembanyama still playing. So former number one pick, pretty much going to be the rookie of the year. He's still going to be available potentially in this game. So that's pretty much everything that you need to know about this Grizzlies-Spurs matchup. We're entering, as I said, the last week of the season. This is the first leg of a back-to-back. Brandon Clark, I know, is probably another intriguing player at this point because he's going to play. Brandon Clark is not on the injury report, as we just listed all those guys. Again, he's getting the reps at the end of the season. So expect to see Brandon Clark as well as all the young guys that we just listed off as well. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. I think we had a pretty good show today. And on tomorrow, you're going to be with Joe Mullinax after the Grizzlies play the Spurs. He'll be with you after the game as I'll be in the arena talking to the players after the game and whatnot and recapping all those things in hand. So Joe Mullinax will be with you on tomorrow's show. And as always, thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. And remember, we are free and available wherever you get podcasts. Until next time, I'll see you. I'm Damichael Cole, and this is Locked On Grizzlies.